Okay, so TJ, thanks for being with us today. Tell me a little bit about what it is that you do at FICO.
So I'm a vice president for our product management group, and I'm responsible for all of our solutions that we sell to financial institutions to help them with things like fraud, originations, those aspects.
And tell us a little bit about FICO.
So FICO, we've been around since the early 50s. Many people know us because of the FICO score, which is obviously something that people use when they get loans and mortgages and other things. But FICO also has a large part of the business where we make and market software solutions to help financial institutions cope with challenges in their operations.
Today, we're talking about a specific kind of fraud, skimming mostly, that involves when cards, credit cards, debit cards, anything essentially that you're going to use at a point of service terminal or at, say, a gas station pump, or even at your bank at an ATM, could potentially put the data on that card at risk, depending on this device that's installed that can steal that data. And then in various ways, people who are involved in these types of schemes can access those funds. They can charge things to your credit cards. It's a big problem, right? The FBI estimates skimming costs $1 billion a year. Why is it so important to track this from FICO's standpoint?
So from FICO's standpoint, we've always built solutions to help, in general, financial institutions, of course, are interested in reducing, fraud. And so we build solutions to help them in that regard. And so, this is a growing problem. Skimming's been around for a while through a variety of different mechanisms. We rolled out chip and PIN cards and other activities. But to the point that you made, compromising card details can still lead to illegitimate purchases. And, the industry, financial institutions, FICO, we're all committed to try to help reduce that.
Now, it seems from our reporting, it's been a challenge in some cases to try and track this. How does FICO collect skimming data?
So what we do is, one of the services we offer is something called the Card Alert Service. And with financial institutions, we monitor over 2 billion transactions a month, looking for anomalous behavior, things that are out of the ordinary. And then by using some sophisticated data analysis, we dig into that behavior and look for potential suspected points of compromise. And once we identify those, we can then see what cards might have been impacted, with the hope of being able to alert the financial institutions before any fraud takes place.
Can you talk a little bit about what some of those triggers are? For example, most of us know that if we're traveling with a card and say we're outside of our locality, that might trigger a fraud alert. They check to see, oh, did you make this charge, 250 miles from your home or overseas? Are there certain things that trigger those alerts that you're looking for?
Yeah, for the alerts that we're looking for, I'll just give you a classic example. Imagine that I was a criminal and I had a set of compromised cards and PINs. I might be at a single ATM location and be putting card after card after card into the machine to attempt to withdraw cash. In the big picture, at that particular ATM location, that looks like a strange pattern of behavior. So we would use that to then untangle the data and figure out, hey, why were all those cards at that location at that point in time? Was there some other location where perhaps the cards were used, and, for example, a PIN also compromised, the 4-digit number that you usually enter with the transaction? And then the investigation starts up.
And skimming activity has jumped. Why do you think that is?
So I think that we're seeing a burst of skimming activity, coming out of the pandemic, right? I mean, obviously, during the pandemic, there was a lot less point of sale transactions. Many of us were staying at home and not doing the normal kinds of things that we do. And so we've suddenly seen a big increase. I think it was nearly 500% increase in the number of events this last year, 2022, compared to 2021. Certainly a big component of that is coming out of the pandemic restrictions, people getting back to more of the normal lifestyle. The other thing is, fraudsters always are looking for weak links and looking for opportunities. And so this just presents another opportunity for them.
And as consumers, right, we want to know, well, how do we protect ourselves? And part of that is understanding, where are we most vulnerable? Where are consumers most vulnerable when it comes to skimming?
So I think in general, the weakest part about the credit or debit card is the magnetic stripe. So, but certainly we all operate in areas of convenience, right? We look for things. And so in locations that, what our analysis shows is locations that are, maybe like in a convenience store, other kinds of things, what I would say is I would just raise my level of awareness a little bit. So for example, if you see anything funny with the device where you put in your card, that's usually a red flag. Something seems a little loose. It doesn't look quite right. Those kinds of things. So always be aware of the device that you're using. And if something looks suspicious, probably, time to move on. The other thing is shield your PIN, right? Your PIN is pretty valuable. Certainly, don't write it down on the back of your card or anything like that, but also shield it when you use it. And look for opportunities to use contactless payments or other kinds of things when and where they're available. But the most important thing that I'll close with is setting up alerting with your financial institution. Sign up for the alerts for suspicious transactions. You can even set things up if you see certain transactions for cash over a certain dollar amount. But take advantage of the alerting that your financial institution will offer you, because it'll help you, also protect your own funds.
One of the most interesting things that we found in our reporting, and this, of course, is that skimming incidents are different from place to place. Yes. California, for example, is by far the hottest spot for skimming. Any insights on why that is?
I think it's in general, over the years, skimming hotspots have moved geographically. Certainly, obviously, California, large population, large sets of merchant locations and other kinds of things. But I think in general, you'll see, fraudsters will move around and find organizations or opportunities for where they can install PIN device cameras to be able to watch what someone's entering and other types of things.
That was something interesting that the Secret Service showed us, was that they, when they're going out, they're finding parts to ATM machines or gas station fueling locations where they've taken a little panel off, they've drilled a little hole in it, and they've installed the camera and then put it back so that they capture your PIN. I always thought I was being really slick about it by using multiple fingers, but that's probably still not enough, right? You talk about covering the PIN pad actually. Correct. So that you don't see anything, right? Because that camera can see what you're doing from anywhere, right?
Correct. Yeah, you want to completely cover, as you showed with your hands. We've all benefited from advents in technology. The fraudsters have benefited from advents in technology as well, right? We have cameras on our doorbells, right? We can see things and other types of things. Cameras have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. They've gotten easier to get, right? And so the technology advancements, while a great convenience for consumers, have also enabled fraudsters to have more sophisticated and harder to detect type events like you mentioned.
And I know we talked a little bit about how consumers can protect themselves, but people might be curious, TJ, how do you pay for things?
It's a great question. I generally look for, where I can use the most secure payment mechanism that I know of, which is, either a contactless payment, right? Which I've gotten much more used to. Well, I admit, just even being in the industry, it was awkward at first, right? And then, chip transactions. If I'm going to use my magnetic stripe and a PIN for a particular transaction, I'm usually looking around at my surroundings, taking a few moments and asking myself, do I feel comfortable? Now, certainly, wide variety of locations, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them, but just want to heighten your awareness a little bit. But typically, I would say contactless, chip, and then fall back to mag stripe if you have to.
Right, because there's sort of levels of protection, as we've learned in our reporting, right? The mag stripe's been around since late 60s, during the 70s. That's the oldest technology, essentially. Chips introduced, at least here in the US, around 2015 or so. More protection there, and then contactless mobile apps and tap to pay seems like it's the safest. Not foolproof, of course, but safer. Right.
We've been in the industry a long time. Nothing is foolproof, right? It's always a challenge to try to stay one step ahead. But yeah, you've outlined the security levels appropriately there. Well done.
And then, FICO suggests that banks need to be more proactive to protect against cards being compromised. What do you think banks should be doing?
So I think that banks, it should continue a lot of the efforts that they're already doing about educating consumers, right? And like I mentioned earlier about the alerting capabilities, being a willing partner with the consumer. It's gotten to the point where oftentimes where maybe when things first rolled out, the alerting was an inconvenience, but now in a way it's a level of comfort, right? If I use my credit card, my debit card, and I, notice my phone buzzing to say, hey, someone used your credit or debit card, as I know that I used it, in a way, that's a comforting experience, right? I know that's me. And so I think that continued partnership with financial institutions about investing in technology, the education with the consumers, and continuing to work in partnership to stay one step ahead of the fraudsters.
And as the U.S. Secret Service told us, it's a cat and mouse game, and the fraudsters are always looking at the technology and trying to figure out ways to thwart it. And we're going to have to keep coming up ways to protect the information, right? So, TJ, thank you so much for talking to us today. We really appreciate it. We hope a lot of consumers will, and we know a lot of consumers will get a lot of, sort of new information from what we've talked about today, and hopefully that'll help drive their behavior to protect themselves in the future. So thank you again.